Cops arrest elderly black woman at a bank. Unaware Hell's Angels are watching. Power often hides behind uniforms, authority, and assumptions. Society teaches us who looks safe, who looks suspicious, and who deserves patience versus punishment. Too often, elderly black people, especially women, are stripped of dignity in spaces meant to serve them. Banks, symbols of trust and stability, become stages for quiet injustices that rarely make headlines. This story explores one such moment. A simple visit to a bank that spirals into humiliation, fear, and an arrest no one expected. But what the officers don't realize is that every action has unseen consequences. Sometimes, the people watching aren't powerless. Sometimes, the silence in the room is louder than sirens. Cops arrest elderly black woman at a bank, unaware Hell's Angels are watching, is a tense, emotional, slow-burn story about respect, accountability, and how underestimating people can be a fatal mistake. Especially when the wrong eyes are paying attention. This is not just a story about bikers or police. It's about humanity, assumptions, and the dangerous arrogance that comes from thinking no one will challenge authority. It's about an elderly woman who deserves compassion, and the chain reaction set off when she is denied it. Settle in. Pay attention to the details. Because every glance, every word, and every silent observer in this story matters more than it seems. Evelyn Carter stood at the bank counter gripping her worn leather purse with both hands. At 73 years old, her fingers were stiff with arthritis, her posture slightly bent, but her eyes remained sharp and observant. She had dressed carefully that morning, pressed blue dress, sensible shoes, hair neatly wrapped in a patterned scarf she'd owned for decades. Respect mattered to Evelyn, even if the world didn't always return it. The bank was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional shuffle of paperwork. Two tellers whispered behind bulletproof glass. A security guard leaned against the wall scrolling through his phone. No one looked rushed, except the young teller now staring at Evelyn's withdrawal slip with a furrowed brow. "Ma'am," the teller said slowly, "this is a large amount." Evelyn nodded calmly. "It's my savings. I'm paying for my sister's medical care." The teller's eyes flicked from Evelyn's face to the slip again. Then to the computer. Then to Evelyn's face. Suspicion crept in like a bad smell. "I'm going to need a manager." Evelyn felt the shift immediately. She'd lived long enough to recognize it. The room felt colder. The air heavier. Minutes passed. A line formed behind her. People sighed. Someone muttered under their breath. Evelyn stayed still, her heart beating faster but her face composed. The manager arrived. A white man in his 40s with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Carter, is it?" he asked, already skeptical. "Yes. Can you explain where these funds came from?" Evelyn blinked. "From my account. I've banked here for 27 years. He laughed lightly, but there was no humor in it. "This amount triggers a fraud alert. We just need to be careful." Careful. That word again. Evelyn reached into her purse and slowly removed her ID, her bank card, even old deposit slips. She laid them on the counter with shaking hands. "I worked 35 years as a school librarian," she said quietly. "I saved every month." The manager didn't apologize. Instead, he nodded toward the security guard. "Call it in." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Excuse me," she said. "For what reason?" "For verification." Two police officers arrived within minutes, too quickly for comfort. Their boots echoed loudly against the polished floor. One was tall and broad-shouldered. The other younger, eager, with his hand resting near his belt. They didn't greet Evelyn. Didn't ask how she was. They spoke to the manager first, nodding as if a crime had already been confirmed. "What's going on?" Evelyn asked, her voice trembling despite her effort. The tall officer finally turned to her. His eyes scanned her like an object, not a person. "Ma'am, we need you to step away from the counter. I haven't done anything wrong. That's not for you to decide." People were watching now. Phones subtly lifted. Whispers spread. Evelyn felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from guilt, but from humiliation. "I just want my money," she said. The younger officer sighed impatiently. "You're being uncooperative." "I'm confused," she corrected. Without warning, the tall officer took her arm. His grip was firm, too firm. Gasps rippled through the bank. "Please," Evelyn said, her voice cracking. "You're hurting me." "Stop resisting," the officer snapped. "I'm not resisting." Her purse slipped from her shoulder and hit the floor, spilling medication bottles and folded receipts. No one helped her pick them up. The handcuffs came out. That's when the room changed again. At a small table near the windows sat 4 men who had been quiet the entire time. Leather jackets. Heavy boots. Beards streaked with gray. One of them wore a ring shaped like a winged skull. They hadn't spoken. They hadn't intervened. But they were watching. Every move. Every word. The oldest of them, a massive man with calm, ice-cold eyes, leaned back in his chair. "That's someone's grandmother," he muttered. Another biker clenched his jaw. They didn't even ask. The leader's gaze never left Evelyn as she was pulled toward the door, her feet barely lifting off the floor. "Get the bikes ready," he said quietly. Outside, sirens screamed as Evelyn was pushed into the back of the patrol car. Tears finally escaped her eyes, not from fear, but from heartbreak. She had survived segregation. Raised children. Buried a husband. Worked honestly her entire life. And this was how she was treated. Inside the bank, the manager exhaled in relief, as if a problem had been solved. He had no idea what kind of problem he had just created. Because the Hells Angels had seen everything. And they never forgot disrespect, especially toward elders. The police station smelled of disinfectant and old coffee. Evelyn Carter sat alone on a metal bench, her hands cuffed in front of her, wrists aching where the steel bit into fragile skin. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching longer than the last. No one had explained anything. They'd taken her fingerprints like she was a criminal. Confiscated her purse. Placed her in holding without so much as a phone call. When she asked for water, an officer told her to wait. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed slowly, the way her late husband had taught her when anxiety threatened to swallow her whole. "This will pass," she told herself. Truth always does. But truth had a habit of arriving late. Across town, the rumble of engines shook the pavement. The Hells Angels rode in formation, not fast, not reckless, but deliberate. 12 bikes cut through traffic like a moving wall of steel and sound. Leather jackets bore the unmistakable winged skull, patches faded from years of riding and surviving. They didn't need to talk much. The scene in the bank had said enough. "What pisses me off," one biker growled through his helmet, "is they didn't even treat her like a human." "She reminded me of my mom," another replied. Their leader, known simply as Brick, said nothing. His jaw was set, eyes forward. Brick was pushing 60, his beard white at the edges, his reputation legendary even among law enforcement. He wasn't known for reckless violence. He was known for precision. And respect. They parked across the street from the police station, far enough to be legal, close enough to be seen. Engines cut. Silence followed, heavy and deliberate. Brick checked his watch. "Let's give them 10 minutes to do the right thing." Inside the station, Officer Daniels, the younger cop from the bank, leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone. "Old lady's probably running some scam," he said casually. His partner, Officer Briggs, didn't respond. He stood at the window, staring out. You see that? Briggs muttered. Daniels glanced up, and froze. Motorcycles. Lots of them. Leather. Patches. His mouth went dry. Is that? Briggs nodded slowly. Yeah. It is. The station suddenly felt smaller. A dispatcher rushed over. Sarge. We've got a situation outside. Sergeant Miller emerged from his office, annoyed, until he saw the window. His face drained of color. How long have they been there? Couple minutes. Miller exhaled sharply. Get internal affairs on the phone. Now. Evelyn was still sitting alone when footsteps approached. A different officer appeared, older, calmer. Mrs. Carter, he said gently, unlocking her cuffs. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Inconvenience, she echoed, rubbing her wrists. You're free to go. She blinked. Just like that? Yes, ma'am. There's been clarification. He helped her stand, offering his arm. She accepted, still confused. As they walked past the desk, Evelyn noticed the tension. Officers whispering. Phones ringing non-stop. Faces pale. When the doors opened, sunlight flooded in, and so did the truth. The bikers stood silently across the street, helmets under their arms, eyes locked on the entrance. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just present. Brick stepped forward slowly as Evelyn emerged. That her? One biker asked. Brick nodded. Evelyn paused, instinctively clutching her purse as an officer handed it back to her. She expected anger. Instead, Brick removed his helmet and gave her a respectful nod. Ma'am, he said, voice calm and steady. You okay? Evelyn swallowed hard. No one had asked her that all day. I am now, she replied. Brick turned his gaze to the officers watching from the doorway. His eyes were cold. Not violent, but heavy with judgment. Good, he said. Because we were about to have a real uncomfortable conversation. Sergeant Miller cleared his throat. Everything's been resolved. Brick tilted his head. Funny how that happens when witnesses don't leave. Phones were out now. People across the street had stopped. A crowd gathered. Internal affairs arrived within minutes. So did a news van. The story changed fast. Body cams reviewed. Bank footage pulled. Statements taken. The truth surfaced, ugly and undeniable. The teller admitted she'd felt uncomfortable. The manager admitted he'd assumed risk. The officers admitted they'd escalated too quickly. None of it sounded good on camera. 3 days later, the charges were officially dropped. 2 weeks later, the officers were suspended pending investigation. The bank issued a public apology, one that felt rehearsed and hollow. But something else happened too. Brick and 2 others visited Evelyn's home. Not on bikes, but in a quiet sedan. They brought groceries. Paid her sister's medical bill in full. We don't like bullies, Brick said simply. Especially when they hide behind authority. Evelyn looked at the men sitting politely on her couch, men the world feared, yet who had treated her with more dignity than anyone else that day. Thank you, she whispered. Brick stood, nodding once more. Take care of yourself, Miss Evelyn. As they left, she realized something powerful. Strength didn't always wear a badge. Sometimes, it wore leather, and watched quietly until it was time to act. Weeks later, the video went viral. Not because of violence. But because of restraint. And because an elderly black woman reminded the world what dignity looks like, and how dangerous it is to underestimate who's watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, unforgettable stories. Your support truly makes a difference.